What's good, YouTube? It's me, your boy Squid, back in with another video. As we all know, there was a new OCG ban list over the course of the weekend that completely obliterated the Tearlaments deck. We're talking about like Kick Alice ban for one. They also limited a lot of cards like Sheeran, Rhinoheart. They even limited Prime Planet Parasios, which was the one that allows you to search for Tearlaments, including the new Tearlaments Catch Gear card that comes out in Photon Hypernova in a month, I believe, in the TCG. And as you know, like the previous ban list before this also hit the Tearlaments deck pretty hard in the OCG. So I'm just thinking, theoretically, this is probably going to happen to the TCG in some capacity, given that the deck is super dominant and there's no max C. There's not really anything to shut down the deck besides, like a D-shifter. So they're probably going to hit the deck equally as hard, if not harder. But I was thinking, hypothetically, if they did bring this ban list to the TCG, would the deck still be playable? And if so, what would it look like? So this is what I put together really quickly to show you guys an idea of how it might look. We're still playing the Ishizu engine. As you know, in the previous OCG ban list, Agito as well as Keldo got limited to 1 because of the fact that the engine is so good in Tearlaments, as well as being splashable in other decks like Naturia. I'm pretty sure that this is going to get hit in some capacity, so we're just going to go off of the fact that they probably limit something. I would hope that the TCG ban list is a little better and they, limit Kelbeck as well, just because this one's, I think, is a little better than Nagito, given that it is a hand trap that works during your opponent's turn and puts a body on board and then bounces something in the most inopportune moments, especially if they drop a hand trap. So probably want to hit this in some capacity. But for the rest of the engine, we're still maxing out on everything. I just think that it's really crucial, given that you can shut down your opponent's entire graveyard for the game whenever you have these in your graveyard, obviously, as well as control your own graveyard. So you can shuffle things back like Dark, like Elf, cards that you've already burned through but want to play again in that duel. It just makes your grind game super good, on top of being able to, pop off Pearl Rhino to pop something at your will when you have this in the graveyard, as well as a Tearlaments name that you can banish this and shuffle it back. So yeah, that's why I think that this deck is really needs these cards. On top of these being level 4 extenders as well, like this deck has gotten hit a lot, obviously, with the banning of Kick Hellos. We're not going to be able to go into anything really easily right away off like a Rhinoheart, for example. So I was thinking, playing Mud Dragon allows us to get a level 4 body, and then, paired with these, we can probably go into some powerful rank 4 plays that are still decently playable against the metagame. Things like Baguska, maybe a Dweller against some random rogue. Time Through for Doer also being generically good as well. Moving on, 3 King of the Swamp. I think this would be absolute staple in this deck. Those of you that don't know, King of the Swamp can be fusion substitute for any fusion monster that obviously lists a name. So it has to be, for example, Grapha in Dragon Overlord of the Dark World, or Tearlaments Rook Hellos. So we can actually use the substitution effect to substitute for Tearlaments Kick Hellos. Given that Kick Hellos is banned, there's not really any other way to make Rook Hellos, and we all know how powerful this card is. It's a solemn warning on legs that also brings itself back when you send it. So yeah, needless to say, I think this is an auto-include. Obviously, the other effect, being able to tutor for polymerization, is very good as well, because of the fact that polymerization is also a starter. If you happen to have another Tearlaments or 2 Tearlaments in your hand, you can just pop off the polymerization to fuse into something right away. And I think Garura is probably like the name that we're going to be going into off of 2 Tearlaments right away, as opposed to Kick Hellos. So it's nice that we actually have this in the TCG, whereas the OCG does not have Garura. So yeah, this deck might be a little more dead over there. But Garura allows us to extend our plays, and then we can also draw 1 card on top of that at the end of our combo. So I think it's pretty worthy of inclusion. Also, polymerization, being able to summon Guardian Chimera, which cannot be targeted by any card effects while you have polymerization in your graveyard. It's pretty good, and especially you can chain block it, so it cannot be ashed, given that you would use Guardian Chimera as Chainlink 1, and then one of your tier effects in your graveyard as Chainlink 2. The tier names, there's only 2 Havinus as well. This is another card that got semi-limited in the previous OCG ban list, but obviously it was not enough. We still have 3 Merly, which is pretty good. We just have to max out on names again, because when we mill, we do want to proc our names as much as possible. They did limit Rhinoheart and Sheeran, which was pretty surprising in my opinion. They just really didn't want Tearlaments played at all or splashed into any deck, even without Kick Hellos. So they said, you know what, we're going to limit Rhinoheart and Sheeran. But again, the one thing to note about this is, you guys, there are a lot of ways to search for Pearl Rhino in this deck. We have cards like Foolish Burial Goods that allows us to foolish cards like Rainbow Bridge of Salvation, which can banish itself to add a Crystal Beast Emerald Tortoise, as well as a copy of a field spell, including Pearl Rhino or Paraisos. And then we have Terraforming and Set Rotation as well. So there's already potentially up to 5 copies of Pearl Rhino in your deck. So we can still see these cards cards pretty frequently. This is basically like we have 6 copies of Rhinoheart and 6 copies of Sharon at any given moment, so we can easily search for them, assuming we open these cards. Moving on is 2 Tearlaments Kashtira. I think this card is pretty good. It's one of the new cards that comes out in the next set, Photon Hybernova. This card, it's a free level 7 extender. You can special summon it from your hand during the main phase. It's a quick effect by banishing 1 Tearlaments card or Kashtira card from your hand or graveyard. And then when it's summoned, you can or you can mill 3 cards. And then when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can mill 2 cards. So this is a pretty awesome card. I don't know if 3 is really worth it, just because there aren't a lot of ways to get it out of your hand if you're starting off and you don't have any ways to fool your graveyard with Tearlaments cards, as well as the fact that it could be a brick in multiple copies. So I think 2 is pretty good. We also have Prime Planet Parasos, obviously at 1 to search for this. So it's just another toolbox card that I think is an auto-include in this deck. Playing 1 Fenrir as well, because obviously we're playing Prime Planet Parasos. This is a new field spell from the next pack that allows you to add a Kashtira card, or a Kashtira monster rather, from your deck to hand when it's activated. So we can either tutor for a Tearlaments Kashtira or a Fenrir, which happens to have the effect to add a Kashtira monster from your deck to hand, including Kashtira Tearlaments, so you can get a free plus that way on top of the banishing effect as well if we happen to go in a battle phase and swing with it. We also have 1 Crystal Beast Mega Brick Tortoise, which we pair with Rainbow Bridge of Salvation. I just think that this is a really good engine to play with Foolish Burial Goods because of the fact that it's so versatile. Foolish Burial Goods being able to send the Suliak to search for any Tearlaments monster or search for a field spell in the form of Rhino or Parasos, allowing you to add Fenrir as well. It's pretty clutch. And then on top of that, you get the Emerald Tortoise as another name that you can fuse with to go into something like a Guardian Chimera. I just thought, yeah, that's pretty neat, if you ask me. It is a little unfortunate that it happens to be a water, so we can't really fuse into anything with the Tearlaments name while it's in the graveyard, because we lost Kikelos, which was the only Aqua target. So that is just one thing to consider. It's a little off attribute, so maybe there's some better ways to make use of this. Also, being a level 3 is a little bad. We can't really normal summon and overlay with it if we wanted to. Polymerization for the King of the Swamp tricks here and there. We don't really want to play more than 1, I think, because it's kind of a brick in some situations. You could maybe play 2 if you want, just to keep King of the Swamp live, because obviously having it in graveyard is a free fusion material, as opposed to fusing from hand is a little better than taking that -1. Prime Planet Parasos, obviously the only relevant effect here is adding the Kashtira monster from our deck to the hand. And then also monsters you control gain 100 attack and defense for each different attribute among the monsters on the field. So that could also be very relevant, giving your monsters a little bit of an attack boost. 3 Scream, I think, obviously we're going to want to max out on ways to start our Tearlaments engine. And yeah, Scream is probably pretty correct to play at 3, given that, paired with them early, we can mill upwards of 6 cards, allowing us to hit potentially another Tearlaments name and a King of the Swamp, so we can instantly go into either Grapha or the Tearlaments Rukelos pretty easily. And I think, obviously in the TCG right now, we're not maxing out on this card, but despite it being so good, because it's really bad going second against cards like Abyss Dweller. But I think this deck probably wouldn't be the best deck after the ban list if it hit it this hard. So I don't know if Abyss Dweller would be a really common card in the format, because there aren't a lot of other decks that can easily make rank 4s. So this card will probably get a lot more value, given that you're probably able to activate your effects that you mill on the same turn that you play it, even going second. 1 Terraforming and 1 Set Rotation. These are our other copies of our field spell. We're only playing 2 field spells, so Set Rotation could be kind of dead, which is where it's nice that the shufflers come in. You can potentially shuffle 1 back, but then you have to get in the graveyard, so it could take some setup. Maybe there are some other field spells that we could probably tech into the deck. If you guys have any ideas, let me know. Obviously, mine's banned, so we can't really just auto-include that as another field spell name. But again, I think Set Rotation is just too good not to play in this situation, so we're just going to play it so we can get access to Rhino, which is obviously a really, really broken card that I'm pretty sure they're going to hit in some capacity in the TCG. 2 First Burial Goods for the aforementioned reasons, because this is just so versatile. We can, again, send the Trap, we can send Scream as well to add a Suliak. So we're potentially adding, 3 different cards. We can add a Tearlaments monster, we can add a field spell, which allows us to add a Kashtira, including Fenrir. We can send Scream to add either Suliak or a Crime, which happens to be in the side deck as well. So yeah, really, really important there to play. And I think same thing with Foolish Burial, obviously being able to Foolish our one-ofs like Rhinoheart or Sharon, or just getting another name in the graveyard. You know, if Abyss Dweller is not really prominent in the metagame, then Foolish Pharaoh just always gets value, so why not just play it as a one-of? Tearlaments Grief is a card that was sort of overlooked. This is a card that came out in the previous set. It's a spell card, allows you to special summon one Tearlaments monster or Visa Starfrost from your deck or graveyard, then send one monster you control to the graveyard with the same type or attribute as that special summoned monster, and then it has the other effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can target one of your banished Tearlaments traps, add it to your hand, but you can only use one effect per turn and only once that turn. So this is just another way to special summon, you know, any of your Tearlaments monster from your deck. If you happen to normal summon Merly, mill 3, we can just activate Grief right away to special summon another card from our decks. And I think it could be really useful as well to be able to special summon, I guess, Rhinoheart in some situations, but then you have to send one monster with the same type, so you would need a warrior or water, so I guess that wouldn't really work. Maybe it's not as good as I thought it was. I didn't really read that correctly. But I still think there's some value, you know, being able to summon a Merly, for example, if you open one of these other names. Maybe there's also oh, you know what? Actually, I just realized Tearlaments Kashtira is a water monster, so it does actually work with Rhinoheart. So maybe we could actually bump this up to 3, given that you're allowed to resolve the Grief and then either special summon a Kashtira Tearlaments to mill 3 cards and then send it to the graveyard and then mill another 2. Or we can special summon a Rhinoheart if we happen to have this on the field and then start our play. So I think it's a pretty good card to experiment with. It's kind of a starter. Obviously, you can't summon a Tearlaments Rhinoheart right away because you have to send it to the graveyard if that's the only monster you control. And then you're not able to use the effect because you would miss the timing there. So yeah, I did play around with this card. I haven't really done a lot of investigation. It's more of like a theory card on paper. So it's probably something you guys want to experiment around with. Moving on to Celiac, I think it's pretty good to play 2, given that the metagame will probably be a lot slower if this deck happens to be hit. And I imagine they'll probably hit, you know, Flunders and Sprite to some capacity, maybe like a limit, you know, starter or something little. So the format will probably be a lot more manageable. Playing 2 Celiac, obviously having more chances to mill a copy to add a free monster is pretty good. And just having 2 in deck as a grind game, I think, is always a good option. And then 3 Imperm, I just think that it's good generically against a metagame. There'll still be players playing Flunder, even if Barrier Statue got banned, because, you know, you're still doing your MPIM plays, you're still setting a trap, you still have the field spell on board as well, so it's still pretty good. So yeah, Imperm, you know, hits a lot of decks, it covers a lot of the field, and it's just a generically good card going first and second, or a card that you can draw off your 6, so I think it's worth it. Side deck, I didn't really change it with like the side deck I was playing for the current format Tearlaments. I just think that these cards are still really good given how complicated the game is. We're probably going to go a lot more into time. But that being said, if, you know, the deck is the metagame is a lot faster, like, you know, the decks aren't just like taking forever to shuffle their decks and banish and go on a billion different chain links, maybe we can just cut these cards. But they're just nice to have, you know, being able to go into sprint and then send Scattershot as well for when you get close to time. And then some back row removal. There will be a lot of back row decks still. A lot of players are playing, some players are playing Labyrinth as well. Those are the archetype that came out in the booster pack recently, and they're getting a new card in the next set that allows them to start their engine and special summon a card from their deck. So there might be some trap decks in the metagame. Who knows? Skill Drain, I think, is really good, again, for Flunderies, and then like the random Sprite players, depending on the ban list. You know, I know it's hypothetical, but these cards are still really, really good to stop your opponent from playing. Tearlaments Crime as well. You could potentially main it as well, but I just want to like minimize on the bricks. I think it's a lot better going first. And a lot of times, like, maybe Celiac is just better to search anyways, given that we have a smaller monster count. Sometimes we might not be left with a monster in hand to discard for Crime, so just searching Celiac is just a lot better to control the board that way. Magnum Mode also got restricted on the ban list in the OCG, which I think is correct, because the card is just a little bit too oppressive, you know, being able to banish and then allow you to search in the end phase to banish again. I just don't think it's really all that fair. So yeah, but we're still playing, you know, the one of with the 2 Druid Swarm, just for the random dark decks. There will be players playing Dark Worlds as well, because that deck is really, really annoying to deal with. So I think these cards are quite good against that deck. And if that deck happens to be, you know, one of the best decks of the format, obviously you have to tweak the side deck a little more to face that deck, you know, play some more cards, maybe some cards like DD Crow or anything just to stop their effects from resolving in the graveyard. The extra deck's pretty standard, just playing 2 Dragostipelia. I think in the grind game, this is probably your main Big Daddy guide to go into. You know, previously we had a lot of plethora of options with Kick Hellos, but obviously with Kick Hellos gone, we don't really have that option. We're probably going to go into Garua. right away off the first Tearlaments name. So from there, you know, maybe we make a link play or like somehow get this in the graveyard, fuse off with it, so on and so forth, and then we can start making Dragostopelia using our fusion fodder that's in the graveyard. Grapha as well is really, really good, being able to make it off of King of the Swamp as a free Omni Negate, pseudo Omni Negate for normal spells or traps or monster effects. Kaleido Heart still standard. Rukalos, we can still make it with King of the Swamp, and I think this card is very, very busted. So if we're allowed to put this on our end board, I'm pretty sure that we're in a pretty good shape. Guardian Chimera just happens to pair well with Polymerization, so why not throw it in? We have a lot more extra deck space now that, you know, a lot of cards are getting banned, like Kick Kills. Mud Dragon as a level 4 body, yeah. And then Abyss Dweller, Zeus, Boguska, Time Thief. You guys know the drill. The rank 4 toolbox. Maybe there's some other rank 4s you can play as well, given that we want to try to emphasize on rank 4s as well. Sprite Elf, Dark, and then Sprint. So yeah, pretty standard. If you guys have any ideas for this deck, let me know. Definitely subscribe, rate, and leave a comment, because this is just like a completely hypothetical idea. I was thinking that, you know, maybe the deck could still function, and I think that it could definitely be playable, at least tier 2 or better, given that, you know, the Tearlaments are still pretty annoying. They still activate in the graveyard. You're still getting infinite pluses without really doing a lot in the deck besides milling. So, yeah. If you guys like this, rate, comment, subscribe again. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.